Peter stared at the doorway as Mabel disappeared into the bedroom, the slam of the door echoing like a gunshot in the silence of their home. It wasn't just a door closing, it was the final acknowledgement that the space between them had become unbridgeable. Months of tension, months of unspoken words, months of misjudged intentions had finally solidified into a wall neither could scale. Mabel sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clutching a pillow as if it could absorb the guilt and fear that swirled inside her. She had tried, oh, how she had tried, to make things right, to explain, to reason, to reach Peter through the fog that had settled over their love. But tonight, the effort felt futile. Every word, every gesture, every attempt had been met with distance, and for the first time, she wondered if the distance was permanent. Peter moved through the living room, his mind replaying every moment of their unraveling. He remembered the laughter, the quiet evenings, the small acts of care that had once defined their relationship. And he remembered the betrayals, the omissions, the broken trust, each one carving away at the foundation they had built together. He loved her still, yes, but love alone was no longer enough. The love that brought them together remained, but it was buried beneath layers of disappointment and fear. Both Peter and Mabel had acted from places of care, yet the lack of transparency had transformed care into conflict. The breaking point came quietly, yet with the weight of inevitability. It started with a conversation that should have been simple, about a dinner arrangement, about a choice of weekend plans. But it quickly escalated, each sentence loaded with months of unspoken resentment. Peter's voice, calm at first, grew sharp, precise, cutting through the tension that had become almost tangible. "Mabel, do you even realize what your decisions have done to us?" he asked, his eyes hard, voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "I trusted you. I gave you everything, my heart, my home, my life, and every time I turned around, you made choices without me. How am I supposed to feel safe in this marriage?" Mabel's throat tightened. She wanted to cry, to beg, to tell him that she had only ever wanted the best for them, but the words felt trapped, unable to escape the knot of fear and shame that had grown inside her. "She thought I was helping," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." But meaning is not enough when trust is broken. Peter's frustration flared, and in that flare, years of suppressed emotions, disappointment, fear, anger, and sorrow erupted. Their voices rose, echoing through the house, each word a spark in a room already full of flammable tension. The fight lasted hours, not in the form of shouting alone, but in the careful, precise dissection of every decision, every misstep, every quiet betrayal that had led them here. Mabel tried to explain herself, to show that her actions were not malicious, but Peter heard only omission, secrecy, and repeated mistakes. And in that hearing, the fragile connection that had survived months of tension shattered completely. For Peter, this was more than an argument. It was an awakening to the reality that the marriage he thought unbreakable had been eroded by small, insidious actions over time. And for Mabel, it was a revelation of the damage her choices, however well-intended, had caused. Both were trapped in a storm of their own making, unable to find a path back without confronting truths they had long avoided. This is where many couples find themselves teetering on the edge. The realization that love alone cannot repair repeated breaches of trust often marks the beginning of permanent change. At this stage, reconciliation is possible only through radical honesty, vulnerability, and an acknowledgement of the emotional harm inflicted, all things neither Peter nor Mabel had fully mastered yet. The night stretched endlessly. Neither spoke, but both felt the heavy presence of unspoken words, the accumulation of months of resentment pressing down on them like a physical weight. Sleep was impossible. Rest was impossible. The home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, enclosing them in the consequences of their choices. Mabel reached out eventually, a small hand brushing against Peter's arm in a tentative gesture. It was an attempt, perhaps the first true attempt, to reconnect. But Peter recoiled slightly, startled by the intimacy he had been yearning for and simultaneously fearing. "Not tonight," he said quietly, though the words were anything but gentle. She nodded, understanding, and in that nod lay both acceptance and despair. She realized that love alone, even when fierce and genuine, could not erase months of accumulated mistakes. It could not erase the invisible walls that had grown between them, walls built from secrecy, pride, and miscommunication. Days passed, and with them came the realization that the marriage had entered a new phase, one of survival rather than joy. They continued to live together, to perform the rituals of partnership, but the emotional bond that had once been effortless now required laborious effort. Every word, every action, every smile carried the weight of past mistakes, each one a reminder that trust, once broken, is not easily restored. Peter found himself questioning everything, every decision, every plan, every moment of quiet suspicion became a reminder of how easily a marriage could unravel. Mabel, too, questioned herself, wondering if her ambition, her independence, her choices had been selfish, whether love required sacrifice beyond what she had known. Both partners experience a mixture of grief, regret, and anxiety. They oscillate between desire to reconnect and fear of further damage. Their story reflects the universal human experience of love tested by imperfection, where intentions collide with consequences in ways that are often unpredictable and painful. And yet, even amidst the turmoil, there were glimpses of hope, brief, fragile sparks, a shared memory, a moment of laughter, a gentle touch, reminded them both that the foundation of their love, though battered, had not completely crumbled. These moments were rare, yet powerful, offering the possibility that if approached with courage, honesty, and humility, repair might still be possible. But the cost of waiting, of silence, of unresolved tension was high. Each day without communication, each choice made in isolation, each unspoken fear added layers to the chasm between them. And in that chasm, both Peter and Mabel were at risk of losing not just their marriage, but also their sense of self, their capacity to trust, and their belief in the love that had once been their greatest joy. The following morning, the house felt heavier than it had ever been. The sun shone, mocking them with its brightness, while inside, Peter and Mabel moved like shadows, cautious and strained. Every glance was measured, every word rehearsed. The intimacy they once took for granted was replaced by the anxiety of anticipation, wondering if the next conversation would be another spark or another flame to consume what remained. Peter sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. His mind replayed the fight from the night before, dissecting every sentence, every gesture, every pause. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the silence, but fear anchored him in place. Fear that any step he took might be met with resistance, anger, or even apathy. He realized that the marriage he had cherished was no longer a source of comfort. It had become a source of tension, a minefield where every interaction carried risk. Mabel entered the kitchen cautiously, her expression carefully neutral. She wanted to apologize, to speak from the heart, but words felt insufficient. The emotional chasm between them had grown wider than either could admit. "Good morning," she said softly, placing a plate in front of him. Peter looked up, his expression unreadable. He nodded. "Barely. Morning," he replied. It was not warmth, not connection, it was acknowledgement. The day unfolded with quiet tension, each moment highlighting the distance that had grown between them. Small gestures that once conveyed love now carried layers of meaning. A touch was scrutinized. A word was analyzed. Every glance was a question. Every silence a judgment. And in this new reality, Mabel began to feel a creeping despair. She had always been independent, ambitious, capable, but now her actions, even those meant to protect or enhance their life, were interpreted as betrayals. The weight of expectation, combined with the fear of further mistakes, was suffocating. By afternoon, the tension reached a boiling point. A minor disagreement about dinner plans escalated into a full-blown argument, the likes of which neither had experienced before. Peter's voice was sharp, precise, cutting through the air like a knife. "Why can't you just involve me? Why do you keep making decisions alone? Do you even care what I think?" Mabel's eyes welled up with tears. She had never intended to hurt him. Every decision she had made, every step she had taken, she had done with the hope of securing their future. But her intentions were meaningless to Peter now. I thought I was helping," she stammered. "I didn't think it would matter." But in Peter's mind, it did matter. Every choice she made in isolation was a confirmation that their partnership, the bond they had promised each other, was fractured beyond repair. The small betrayals, the secrets, the omissions, they had piled up like snow, pressing down until the house of their marriage groaned under the weight. Repeated breaches of trust, even if unintentional, erode the foundation so subtly that when it finally collapses, both partners are blindsided by the force of its fall. The first major breakdown is rarely about a single event. It is the accumulation of months, sometimes years, of small mistakes left unresolved. As the argument continued, the emotional distance that had been quietly growing erupted into raw confrontation. Words that had been held back for months were finally unleashed. Peter's frustration, anger, and heartbreak collided with Mabel's guilt, fear, and desperation. Each accusation, each denial, each plea echoed through the house, leaving an invisible scar on every wall, every floor, every piece of furniture that had once witnessed love. At some point, the fight turned inward. Peter questioned himself as much as he questioned Mabel. Have I failed? Did I miss the signs? Was I too blind to see what was happening? And Mabel, in turn, questioned her own choices. Have I ruined everything? Was I too selfish? Did I betray him even when I thought I was protecting us? Their love, though still present, was caught between these two currents of doubt and regret. It was fragile, vulnerable, and trembling, as if a single wrong move could snap it entirely. And in truth, it was on the verge of snapping. By evening, exhaustion settled over them like a shroud. Neither spoke, neither moved much. They were physically together, yet emotionally miles apart. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by replayed arguments and imagined betrayals. Dreams were filled with what-ifs and could-have-beens, shadowing the night with sorrow and anxiety. The following days were no better. Patterns established themselves. Arguments over trivial matters, long silences, gestures misinterpreted, words overanalyzed. Every glance was a question, every silence a judgment. And then this new reality, Mabel began to feel a creeping despair. She had always been independent, but now she felt like afternoon an incident. A minor incident sparked what would be remembered as the turning point of their breakdown. A misfiled document, an overlooked message, a small oversight, something insignificant in isolation, escalated into hours of shouting, crying, and blaming. Peter accused Mabel of carelessness. Mabel accused Peter of being unsympathetic. Each word, each tear, each raised voice deepened the wound. By nightfall, both were drained. They sat across from each other, silence stretching like a chasm. Neither could move closer, neither could turn back. The emotional distance had become a physical presence, a barrier neither knew how to cross. In that silence, they both realized something chilling. The mistakes, once small, had accumulated into a storm neither could easily weather. Love remained, yes, but it was buried under layers of fear, mistrust, and regret. And in that burial, the path forward was obscured, the future uncertain, and the bond that had once seemed unbreakable was now fragile and exposed.